Good morning. My name is Susan Key, and I have a great honor today of speaking with Robin Piacine. And Robin is the niece of Sergeant William Charles Bradley, who is still missing from the Korean War. He is among the 7,556 Americans who are still missing from the Korean War. So these families have waited and are still waiting over 7 decades for their loved ones to come home. So I just want to first start off introducing Robin Piacine. Hi, Robin, how are you?
Hi, Susan, I'm fine.
Thank you for having this conversation with me today and helping educate everyone about what families of our Korean War missing heroes are going through as they're still waiting. And of course, we want to honor the service story and the sacrifice of your uncle. So thank you for doing that with me today. I have known Robin since 2017. The last time I did an interview with Robin was at Washington, D.C. at DPAA Family Update Meeting for all Korean War families. And I had the great honor of meeting Robin for the first time in 2017. And we have kept in touch over these years, even though I haven't been able to go back to DPAA meeting. Hopefully I will next year. So I am so grateful to know you, Robin, and to continue joining you on your journey and quest to find more information about your uncle. So first of all, and most important, I want to express to you, Robin, my sincere condolences for all that your family has suffered. Your mother and your grandmother especially carried so much pain and heartache for the entire lives they had to live without your uncle. And I know that I can never take that pain away from your family because now you carry that same pain. But I just wanted to express to you just our condolences from on behalf of the Korean people for all that your family suffered and sacrificed for us to be saved from communism. And I just wanted to let you know that every day I'm grateful for especially the heroes who gave their own lives to save us so that we can live in freedom. And I will never forget that freedom is not free. I mean, it is really true when they say freedom is not free. Somebody sacrificed, and one of the many American heroes that sacrificed for our freedom was your uncle, Sergeant William Charles Bradley. So I will always remember his sacrifice and his name and his story. And I thank you for keeping his memory alive and sharing his story with us. So I just wanted to express my heartfelt gratitude and condolences to you and to all the families who are watching this. I have seen so much pain in the faces of all the families I have met at DPAA's Korean War missing families. And my heart breaks too, because I know that my country and the war in my country caused that pain for all of you. And I am so sorry for that. But I will do everything I can to, it's not a but, it is and I will do everything I can to honor the fallen heroes so that people don't forget the sacrifices made for the Korean people. So with that, I thought I would start with kind of a summary of what happened to Sergeant William Charles Bradley and the circumstances by which he became missing. And then we'll step back and have Robin kind of tell us about him, some family background, and his service in Korea 2 times. So that is one of the most interesting things we'll talk about, is that he actually served in Korea 2 times. So I will read this part of the case file from DPAA on Sergeant William Charles Bradley, who served with the U.S. Army's 2nd Infantry Division Medical Company. Sergeant Bradley was lost during the fighting withdrawal by the 2nd Infantry Division on the Chongchon River, which began on the evening of November 25th, 1950. The 9th Infantry was heavily engaged from the first hours onwards, then began an ordered withdrawal under fire south to Kunu-ri. Through a series of violent attacks, the Chinese Communist forces threw the entire 2nd Infantry Division back to even smaller, more concentrated defensive positions. Many groups of men were overrun by superior Chinese Communist forces, and Sergeant Bradley was among those captured as this heroic but unsuccessful attempt to help cover the 2nd Infantry Division's withdrawal and fighting to Suncheon concluded. So they were trying to withdraw from Kunu-ri to Suncheon, and the Chinese just kept attacking. And somewhere in those attacks, a series of attacks, your uncle was captured. Although initially reported as killed in action, companions recalled that Sergeant William Charles Bradley was alive in enemy hands, and one noted his death on or about 15th of December of pneumonia while he was still en route to a holding point. So while they were taking him to a prison camp, he is believed to have died from pneumonia in the hands of the Chinese communists. So that is the story of what happened to Sergeant Bradley. So we're going to go back a little bit now with Robin and have her tell us a little bit about who he was and how it led to this point of him becoming captured in Korea. So Robin, can you share a little bit about what you know about your uncle from what you learned from your family? What was he like as a person?
Well, first of all, he was the only son of my grandmother. So, and he grew up like many people of that era, coming out of the Depression. And so the family also was without a father eventually. And so what I can say about him is, and what I recall just some cute little moment in life with him, was that her mom made bread and she had customers. And so what they did, my mom and he actually went in a little wagon and delivered the bread. And so he would put her back in the wagon on the way home. So she just adored him and she loved him so much. And so anyhow, she looked up to him almost like a father, you know, adoration like. But anyhow, so he ended up working at Maslin Carpets with his mom in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And at some point, he ended up deciding to enlist in World War II at the end of the war. So he actually ended up going over to Korea during the time of the occupation, the first time.
Well, before we get into his military service, I want to ask you a little bit about your mom and your uncle. You said they were very close and she really looked up to him. How many years difference was there between your mom and your uncle? She was obviously a younger sister.
Yes, let's see now. I would say probably about 3 years.
Oh, okay, so she wasn't that much younger. So then they must have been very close then, if there were only 3 years in between them. I see. So then, I'm sorry for interrupting. So you were saying that he enlisted during World War II.
Yes, and so he only spent a few months over in South Korea, but it was during the time of the occupation, the U.S. occupation of South Korea. And I remember my mom saying that, you know, he had told her that the South Koreans really had suffered, that they were very hungry a lot. And that just resulted from the way the Japanese had treated them.
Right.
And yeah, and the country itself was just a mess, he said.
Right. So let me give everyone some context to what Robin just explained as her uncle being there for occupation. So for those of you who don't know, Korea was fully annexed and occupied by the Japanese Empire during World War II. And it was subject to Japanese control. And so after the Japanese surrendered, after the Americans defeated them in World War II, they were taken out of Korea. And one of the key duties of the US military was to go in and handle the, taking the Japanese military out of Korea. So your uncle was there to kind of performed those duties of making sure that the country was back in the hands of Koreans and also helped stabilize the country. I know that they were trying to start to have elections and have a democratic government installed. And so the US government and military was there to try to help stabilize the country after it was in disarray, with the Japanese having had control of it for over 50 years. So this was a very honorable duty that your uncle had. And it's something that I think a lot of Koreans watching this will appreciate, is that he came to defend and liberate Korean people 2 times, right? So he came to help liberate and stabilize Korea after the Japanese had surrendered. And then he came back during the Korean War. That is so heroic to me, that he was there at the most important times when the Korean people needed that kind of help from America. He was there 2 times. So I just really want to acknowledge that and just really honor your uncle as a real hero to the Korean people for having been there at that really critical and uncertain time, right after the Japanese had surrendered. So,
Well, thanks.
So that's really remarkable. So I think according to the notes you gave me, he was there in 1948 in Korea. And what's interesting is while he was in Korea, that's when in North Korea, the Soviets installed Kim Il-sung, the Chinese communist dictator. So he was put in 1948. So this was a very tumultuous time, but there he was right at the beginning. So it is really something heroic. Your uncle is a great hero. So then can you now tell me about what happened after he came back from serving in Korea the first time in 1948? He got out of the military, right?
Yeah, so what happened is that there was a huge downsizing of the military after World War II. And so in some cases, they just, instead of making the soldiers continue on with the several years of, their enlistment, they just let them go. Well, it wasn't long before he re-enlisted.
Mm-hmm. So he re-enlisted, and so then the Korean War started. So when did he leave for Korea? Do you have a sense of the timeline?
Yes, I know that he was in Fort Washington and Fort Houston to get his medical training. And then it looks to me like from the records I have that it probably was sometime in July of 1950.
Yes. And Robin and I did a little bit of research on the 2nd Infantry Division's movement into Korea. And so many of the elements of 2nd Infantry Division's regiments were thrown into Korea in mid-July to end of July. And then they were put right on the front lines of Pusan Perimeter, guarding that defensive perimeter along the Naktung River. So there was only a very small perimeter of Korea left that had not fallen to the communists. So very quickly after the North Koreans invaded on June 25th, they made their way down to a small perimeter from Daegu to Pusan. And that was all that was left. Korea absolutely could have been lost. And there your uncle was, again, back in Korea for the second time, defending that line and helping treat the guys that are getting wounded during battle. And so he's right there with them as a combat medic on the front lines along the Naktung River. From what I also found about the 2nd Infantry is that they finally broke out of the perimeter in September 17. So they were able to break out 2 days after the Incheon landing. So this 71 years ago, about this time was when your uncle was breaking out of Pusan Perimeter. And so then very rapidly, they went up the central part of Korea to Chonju by September 28. And then they were ordered to cross the 38th into North Korea sometime in probably late October or November, from what I could gather. So they crossed the 38th sometime in October to November. And so by end of November is where your uncle was fighting along with the soldiers and treating the wounded at Chongchon River. So your uncle, saw so much fighting and so much horrors of war as a medic. I imagine he saw so many guys die and get killed in combat while he was treating them, all the way from Pusan, all the way up into past Pyongyang, almost to the Chinese border. So he saw the entire peninsula of Korea, almost. And that's really remarkable to me, because I think most Koreans haven't even seen the entire peninsula of Korea. But these great Americans who came fought every inch of that ground that they gained, trying to liberate it from the communists. So that was the path of the 2nd Infantry. Now, while he was in Korea, did he write any letters home to his mom or to his sister? Can you tell us if he did, when he wrote and what he wrote?
Yes, he wrote a letter. In fact, I have it in front of me. I can read it.
Wow, you have the actual letter.
Yeah, well, I have a copy of a letter, and I
Wow, that's incredible.
try not to get the other letter out too often, because it's kind of, but he wrote a letter to, let's see here, his mom, and he says, just a few lines to let you know that I'm fine and well, and hope the same of you and the rest of the family. Mother, in my other letters, I told you that I was an aid man fixing up the wounded. Well, right now, I got a transfer to the motor pool. So now I'm driving a litter jeep, carrying the wounded from the front lines to the collection station. He says that he will be coming home probably for Christmas. And that's the part that really hurts, because so many servicemen were told that, that they would be home for Christmas. But his PS says, tell Grandma, Bobby, Monin, Frank, Pat, and Carl, which are my mom and dad, and Carl Jr., who was just born, Paul, Marie, and Ronnie, which were my aunt and uncle and cousin, that I said hello, and I hope they are all well and fine. And that actually came through on November 21st through San Francisco, California.
Okay. And I just realized that I hadn't shown everyone this beautiful picture of your uncle. He was so handsome, and it looks like he's wearing these olive uniform with there's a medical pin on him. So this was clearly before he went off to Korea, because I don't know if he was a medic the first time he went to Korea. Do you know if he was a medic then?
It sure makes me wonder,
So he could have been a medic when he went the first time too. We don't know, right? Yeah, okay. Wow, so this is a beautiful color picture, which is really unusual. And so, so this is Sergeant William Charles Bradley, U.S. Army Medical Company, 9th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division. He went missing on December 1st, 1950. I want to show everyone what it was like for Sergeant Bradley and all the soldiers fighting at Chongchon River, Kunu-ri, Suncheon area where these battles took place. I don't know if this picture is from that area, but it gives you a sense of the freezing cold, the mountainous terrain, and the swarms of Chinese communists that overwhelmed and encircled the American units, both on the Western Front and on the Eastern Front of Korea. So there was a Battle of Chongchon happening on the Eastern Front, and on the Western Front, this was it, Chongchon and Kunu-ri. This is where the Americans took the brunt of the attack from the Chinese Communist forces. This is the only picture that I could really find related to Kunu-ri. This is approximately the area that Sergeant Bradley and Robin's uncle would have been. Now, this is the 2nd Engineer Combat Battalion of the 2nd Infantry Division. So these combat engineers were responsible for clearing landmines and roads. And so you can see that they are, I guess, holding the line here, their defensive position behind some kind of a road clearing machine or tractor. But look at their outfits. This is still their summer gear, and they don't even have proper clothing to keep warm. So they were fighting not only the Chinese, but the freezing cold, just the incredible frigid weather they had to fight against as well. So I just want people to have a sense of what they had to endure and suffer through as they were fighting the Chinese. Now, this is the map of where the Battle of Chongchon took place. And so that green circle there is where the 9th Infantry Regiment was. So that is probably where Robin's uncle was fighting. And they were trying to draw to that yellow circle in the middle there. That's Kunu-ri. And somewhere from that area is where your uncle is believed to have been captured and then taken by the Chinese. So they were trying to withdraw south to Kunu-ri, and somewhere along that line, he was captured. And eventually, the 2nd Infantry Division withdrew to Suncheon, which is the lower yellow circle. But many got captured and many got killed even before they made it down to Suncheon. And this is all north of Pyongyang, and this is only 60 miles south of the Chinese-North Korean border. So they were pretty far up north in North Korea. So they had made quite a headway, the 2nd Infantry Division. And they had fought very bravely and made huge advances from, Pusan Perimeter all the way to North Korea. So they were obviously very brave and very skilled fighting soldiers when they got encircled by the Chinese. So this is an overall map that kind of shows you, view of entire peninsula of Korea and where Sergeant Bradley became missing and captured. So that red circle, the bottom, actually near Yeongbyon is what it says there, but that's where the battles were happening. And then this other circle at the top, the red circle, is where he is believed to have died en route to a prison camp. So I will have Robin speak more about that, but I wanted to provide this map so that you could see, he was way up there, and he had made such advance with the 2nd Infantry Division. Let's see here what I have next. So Robin, can you tell me how your uncle becoming missing, how your family received that news of him becoming missing?
Actually, I found copies of telegrams, and one telegram mentioned the fact that he was, missing in action. And so who wants to get a telegram, when they have somebody, serving in a war? And so I can only imagine the way that my grandmother and my mom felt when they received that. The only thing that I can say is that, eventually they have been told that he was on a POW list that was released by the communists. And so that would have given my grandmother and my mother some hope, that he's still alive, we're probably going to get him back, or trying to be optimistic about things. But it must have been a terrible shock to hear. And I wanted to mention, one of the things I wanted to mention is before my uncle ever left to go to Korea the second time, he did promise my mother that, or she promised my my uncle that if she ever had another boy, she would name him William Charles Bradley, and she did. So that's sweet. Yeah. So this telegram, it's hard to get news like that, but many people did.
Right. Well, this must have been devastating to your grandmother to have her son missing and not know what happened or where he was or his whereabouts. So these are some of the articles that you found. Can you tell me where these articles were found and what they say? They have missing on one of them and prisoner of war in another. So clearly nothing was clear.
Right. And the fact that she lived in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, it was probably from one of the Carlisle newspaper, which there was only one of. But hard to know for sure because there was another state kind of Harrisburg paper. But I've never been able to determine where they really came from. But at any rate, these articles were kept all these years.
Right. So one of them says that he's on a prisoner of war list. So I wonder how that was communicated. So a prisoner of war list. So that could have been on 1952, 53, some years on, because they wouldn't know that right away if he's on a prisoner of war list.
No, exactly. So
yeah. So at first, I'm sure they reported him as missing, and then maybe a year or two later into the war, somewhere this report came out that he's prisoner of war list. Now, let's talk about this list now, Robin. This is really incredible to me. Can you tell us what this list is? And then I'll kind of roll the screen here and show.
Yeah, this is well known among historians. This is actually called the Shadish list. And this was a surgeon who was captured as a POW. And he would receive information from other POWs about somebody, from my knowledge, either captured or had died while imprisoned. And the information would pass between each other, but he kept this list. He kept it, and it was accurate, and he kept it hidden because he would have been killed if anyone found this on him. And he was actually a prisoner of war for, I believe, 1,100 days and survived it. And not only was he a hero during that time, but he ended up taking care of people. Once he got out, he became a physician and would do, a surgeon, and he would take care of people that had terrible burns and so on and so forth. So he continued being a hero all his life.
So this is a great American hero to all the families of missing, because his record keeping of all the guys that he remembers either meeting in the prison camp, or I don't know if these are those that died or he saw, but he wanted to account for them. And it looks like it has dates next to their names. So it leads me to believe that those are the dates they died.
Yes.
So I think these are probably the name of all the prisoners who died in the prison camps in North Korea. And what I circled there in red or in square is 9th Medical Company. And then Bradley appears. Yes. So we believe this is your uncle that he had captured in this. But now on that, it just says, it doesn't say when he died. So it's kind of hard to make out, but he did remember maybe hearing something about your uncle dying in a march or something. But this is really incredible. I don't know how many prisoners of war's names he kept, but the fact that he kept this and brought it out so that their families would know what happened to their loved ones is tremendous act of patriotism and heroism. And so I did a little bit of search on Mr. Shadish, And I was so happy to find he was actually interviewed in 2010. And he was living in Redding, California, and they did a news story on him. So I found this picture of him. Look at him there with the American flag. What a patriot. What a great hero to all the POW MIA families. So he also wrote a book, from what I understand, and I'm going to get that book and read it. But he is like the Johnny Johnson list, is it not, Robin?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so there was another gentleman who was a prisoner of war, Johnny Johnson. He also kept a list, and he snuck out that list. And it had several hundred names of all of the prisoners of war that had been, that died in the prison camps. To me, they were killed because they weren't given food, they weren't given medical care. So to me, it's killed. It's not died in a prison camp. They were deliberately killed by lack of care by the North Koreans and the Chinese communists. So this is Mr. William Shadish. So I wanted to take a minute here to really honor this American hero and Korean War hero. I have never heard of him until you told me about this Shadish list. So he is even lesser known than Johnny Johnson. And I absolutely want to give this hero some recognition, overdue. And it is too bad that we didn't get a chance to talk to him while he was alive. He died in 2011. What a tremendous thing he did for the families.
I agree with you.
So I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to come back to this a little later. And I want to ask you a couple more questions about your uncle. Okay, so are you there? I don't know what happened.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I'm still getting a hang of this thing. Okay, so so Robin, can you tell me how this really affected your grandmother and your mother? And I know that they spent many years searching for answers. If you can kind of tell me about their quest and all the different things they tried to get information about your uncle and what happened to him.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about him, except that my grandmother became a Gold Star Mother president of a local chapter. And she did receive extra correspondence after they considered him killed in action. And, you know, they just wanted additional records if she had it, and like dental records for identification purposes, if that opportunity would come up. But once she accepted the fact she did, it was killed in action, she became really as an advocate for other family members who had somebody missing from the Korean War that did not have any information at all. So she would actually take them to Washington, D.C., see their congressperson, and to give them a little bit of a push and to see what they could find out about their loved one.
That's incredible courage and strength she had to do something like that as a woman in 1950s. I imagine that was unusual for a woman to be, you know, to take charge and lead an effort like that on behalf of other families as well, not only for herself.
Right. I think so.
Robin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you were cutting out a little bit, so I didn't quite hear everything you said, but your grandmother must have been quite a woman of strength and resolve.
Yeah, she was. Yes. Yeah.
So what was your grandmother able to find out during her lifetime about what happened to her son?
She really was not able to get much information. I mean, any records that she would have been able to get would only have been, you know, we continue to look for more information, you know, for your son, but at this time we don't have any more. And it's kind of like the same thing today. We don't have any more information about your uncle, but we will continue to look for the answers.
Mm-hmm. So when was it discovered that your uncle actually died en route to a prison camp? How was that information found out? When did you find that out recently, or is that something How
That
was that
was,
information uncovered?
that's really interesting. I'm really glad that you asked that question. You know, there are, first of all, there are analysts and researchers that work for the Department of Defense on these cases. They're given a question and they go to the archives and they try to find the answer to it. However, they are not spending the whole day looking for one individual for additional information on them. I don't know if the issue is that they need more analysts or what it is, but an analyst didn't find the information regarding my uncle being a POW. It was a Gold Star family member who found it. He was doing research at College Park, Maryland, at the archives there. And so he was looking through debriefing reports and he came across a debriefing report that said that, you know, he remembered 2 people that died while in route. And he mentioned my uncle and said that he had died of pneumonia. So since he was listed as killed in action, I requested that his that be changed to POW. And the reason is because it's very important for people to understand that you have to look for people in the area that they died. So if they would have been looking in another area, according to secondhand information, he wouldn't be there. I want them to find him. And that's why I was very insistent that they change it to POW.
Right. So that is a very important point you made, Robin, that it matters what the records say about your uncle, where and how he died, because those are the places that our government will use this information to go recover our missing when we are allowed to go into North Korea. So if it said that your uncle was in a prison camp and he died there, that's a very different place than saying that he died en route to a prison camp and looking someplace between the battle and the prison camp. So it makes the search totally different if the information is wrong. So that is a very good point. Now, one thing I also want to point out to the audience here is that Robin is really a group of families I really respect and admire because she never knew her uncle. And yet she is one of the strongest voices and advocates for all of the missing the families of missing. And, you know, I meet a lot of families who are nephews or nieces of Korean War heroes that are missing. And they all have this devotion, which is amazing to me, that you can have a devotion to someone you never knew and make this really your lifelong mission to find out information and see them come home. So I'm going to ask you, Robin, how did this start for you, this interest in your uncle and your devotion to keeping this quest alive that your grandmother and your mother had carried in their lives? How did you become interested in it?
Well, when my mother donated DNA and was invited to an update for the Korean War families, I wanted to support her. And so we actually all went as a family. There were quite a few of us that went. And my mother was just like everyone. For the first time you go to one of those meetings, you just don't know what to think. So I offered to help her out. And so she asked me if I could be the point of contact for any information. And so I agreed. I didn't have any issue at all with it. And so that's really how I became involved. And you know what? My uncle's family, regardless if I ever met him or not, he's family. He's the uncle I never really knew. And I needed to find out as much as I could about him.
Right. And every hero deserves someone to be fighting for them. And so I am so grateful that you're still fighting for your uncle and making sure that he's not forgotten about in our search for him. The other thing I want to ask you is, what have you found to be helpful that could be of help to other families as you've, spent these many years searching for information about your uncle, what are some things you would suggest to other families out there about how they can find out more information on their loved one that's missing?
I would first say that if there's anybody out there that's never been contacted by the Department of Defense or a casualty office, that they need to do so right away. And if you go to the DPAA website, they list all of the different casualty offices. So all branches of military service have a casualty office. And so for the Army, in which my uncle served, it's in Kentucky, but all that information, address, phone number, are on that website. And that's the first thing you need to do, is to let them know. The other thing I would say to families is it's extremely important to donate mtDNA sample, because this could help you identify your lost loved one or help in identifying somebody else. Because when you narrow it down and say, for instance, well, it wasn't my uncle that they were looking at, but there was only maybe one other person it could be, and that could be you. So it's extremely important to do that. And I did that early on. And so that's just a critical part of identification. The other thing that I would say to the families out there is to go on the DPA website, because they have a lot of information on there. You can get case files. You can just find out if there's any more information on your loved one, as far as being where they were at, who they were attached to, and things like that. It's pretty simple to operate. And read, study about the Korean War, because you really get a sense of what your loved one has gone through. And for me, that's something I always question, without knowing the fact that it was the coldest winter practically on record, when these guys were fighting in northern North Korea, and the fact that their boots were taken from them, some of the prisoners of war, they were made to march. It's just something we need to know, because they're not able to tell us. And so thankfully, in the Army, the Navy, whatever, Marines, these guys looked out for each other. They were brothers. And so it's just helpful to know as much as you can learn about the Korean War. And there are several books out there that are really excellent, some of which are written by people that actually served in the Korean War. So the last thing I would say is you need to go to your congressman if you haven't done so, because we have files that have not been declassified yet. And what happens is a congressman might introduce some legislation, but because of the time limits, of being in office, a lot of times laws are never passed. So they have to keep being reintroduced. So it's your advocacy for your loved one and many others that makes a difference when you call them up and say, this is important to me, and it should be important to you. And we need your help. And how can we help you to move forward?
Mm-hmm. Now, the other thing I want to tell our audience here, Robin, is that you were the past president of the Coalition of Families of Korean War and Cold War POWs and MIAs. So you have formally taken on some responsibilities to represent all the families. And I believe you have made several visits to Congress, knocking on doors of congressmen to ask for declassification. Can you tell me about anything you've done while you were president, some of the efforts you undertook to help the families?
Sure. I was asked to testify before Congress and to the Armed Services Committee as to why it was necessary to continue to have an identification lab out in Hawaii And, why is the whole mission important? And I just couldn't believe anybody would ask that question. It was just beyond me. And so I was able to testify before Congress why it was important, how many families are still waiting for information, my personal story. And, it ended up that things worked out okay. But I also did something which was really unusual. As president, I created this little project called it's called the Pennsylvania Project, a model for the nation, because not enough people were contacted at that time regarding donating the DNA. There were so many people that just didn't know about it. And so I had both House and the Senate in Pennsylvania sign on to this, resolution. And we did a public affairs announcement. We were on TV and we got responses. So it kind of pushed the government a little bit to try to find a better way to try to find the families. So you have to push a little bit. And it wasn't in a nasty way, but it was in a way that I felt was important and proper.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one of the other things we used to do is when we had a national update, we were able to finally have support meetings at the update and have a little time for, snacks and stuff. And we would rent a little room and people would come, and honestly, it's like, we know each other. We know the pain. And it's hard to talk about this for anybody to really understand how much it hurts, and the frustration, the sadness, the depression. And then at times, the happiness that we have somebody that we can talk to. And as president, that's one of the biggest things I did was listen, and steer people in the direction that they needed to go when they had the questions I couldn't answer.
Right. So that's a very important point you make, is that I think a lot of families may feel so alone in their quest, right? That nobody understands their situation. There's somebody missing from 70 years ago. Nobody cares. It's been so long. And they're, coming across obstacles. But when they know that there's an organization like the one you served in, and that organization still exists. Now, Rick Downs is the president of the Coalition of Families of Korean War, that there is a place you can go to for help and guidance and just that camaraderie between families, right? To be able to really share in what you're all going through, that same experience of pain and loss, and just searching for answers. So I think that's a very important thing to point out, that there is an organization for Korean War missing. I know there's another one for Vietnam as well. So I think that's so great that the families have organized themselves, and there is strength in numbers too, isn't there, Robin? If there are things that you really want changed and challenge our government to be more accountable, this is very important.
Yeah.
So I really admire you, Robin, for all that you have undertaken, not only for your uncle, but for all the families, to have more voice in reminding our government that so many are still unaccounted for and the families need answers. So this is so wonderful that you have done all of this work, and it comes out of your devotion for your uncle and from the pain that you saw your mom and your grandmother carry in their lifetime. So it is really wonderful that you have turned that into positive action for the families. I want to share now a little bit more on the presentation I have here. There's a couple other things I wanted to cover. And I just wanted to give people a sense of the situation now, where we are with our Korean War missing. So during the Korean War, over 8,100 became missing. And today, there are still 7,556. Now, you see the breakdown there by military branch, Army being the largest number. But overall, the highest concentration of where our American missing heroes are from the Korean War are there in North Korea, a very closed off place. And the next screen here shows where they are in North Korea. So there's a big concentration, about 1,200 missing in POW campsites where they were believed to have been buried after they died in the prison camps, and they were never returned by North Korea. And then there's this other area, Unsan Chongchon area. That's the area where Robin's uncle was fighting. There was a lot of losses at Kunu-ri and Battle of Unsan, which was in October, month before Robin's uncle's 2nd Infantry went up there. The 1st Cavalry Division took huge losses at Battle of Unsan. And the same area, about 3 weeks later, Robin's uncle, Sergeant Bradley, was there with the 2nd Infantry again. And then if you look to the right, on the eastern coast, we have Chosun Reservoir battles where the Marines and the US Army 7th Infantry was fighting. And again, totally encircled and took huge losses there at Chosun. And then there were some UN cemeteries near the Chosun where the Marines buried some of their dead from the battle that they could not bring out. So there's roughly 5,300 still missing in North Korea. That's a huge number. And that makes it really difficult for the families to have hope because, Robin, as you know, North Korea is one of the most hostile, closed-off regimes in the world. And they don't negotiate, and it's hard to negotiate with them. And so the families are kind of caught in the middle, waiting for their loved ones to be brought home somehow, despite how it is with our relations with North Korea. Now, the next thing I want to show is the POW camps. I know that Robin's uncle didn't actually make it to a POW camp, but since we were on the topic of that Shadish list of the prisoners that died in prison camps, I wanted to kind of give people an appreciation and understanding of what happened and what it looked like. So this is a prison camp in North Korea. Typically, it was just houses, a bunch of houses that the North Koreans had taken control of and put the US and UN prisoners in there. So it wasn't really like a barrack or anything like that. I guess the existence as a POW in North Korea was absolute nightmare. There was just massive starvation and disease, dysentery, and lack of medical care. You imagine a lot of the prisoners of war had been inflicted with some kind of war, battle wound, and they weren't even cared for, whether it was open wounds or broken limbs, or they just didn't get any medical care whatsoever. And so they died of either just lack of care and or starvation as well. So it was a miserable, horrific place to be. And by 1951, the Chinese tried to improve the conditions for the POWs because there was such a high death rate. But over 40% of the POW prisoners of wars died in captivity out of the 7,000. That's a huge number. So close to 3,000 prisoners died in the prison camps. This is where the prison camps were. You see Camp 2, 4, 5, and 1 and 3. Those are right along the Yalu River there at the border of North Korea and China. So they placed them as far north as they could so that it would make it hard for the prisoners of war to escape and go back to friendly lines. It was virtually impossible. And having been starved, they were so weak. And looking like a foreigner, they would have been spotted and sighted very easily by even the locals and turned in. So it made it very difficult for the prisoners of war to escape. I thought I would show this picture. This is a picture I took when I went to Korea in 2018 with Gold Star families of missing heroes. So this is the family of Joseph Matsunaga, who I love and have known for a long time. On the left there is Pat Morishima. Her brother is still missing from the Korean War. And so they're looking across this river to North Korea. And you can only imagine what they feel and what Robin and all the families probably feel as they think about North Korea, such a closed off, isolated place, and knowing that their loved ones may be there, and where are they? And when will we get them back? So these are the feelings of just total sadness and desperation and uncertainty that the families feel. So I wanted people to appreciate what the families are feeling. And Robin, I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit. I'm only, speaking as a third person, having, known families, but is there anything you want to say about what this feels like for families today, still waiting after 70 years?
I tell you, that picture, it's hard for me not to be crying right now. I have to tell you the truth. It's just heartbreaking to think that he's over there somewhere. I mean, I feel like jumping in the water and swimming. You know what I mean? To just stand there and not do something, knowing he's over there somewhere, it's just, But in the other sense, it kind of, I don't know, it gives you a vision of a place that you know that he really is. I mean, all we have is paperwork. Not
Right.
like we.
So you're right. It actually helped the families a lot to actually see the country that their loved
Yes.
ones fought in. Because we went to the various places in Korea, so they can kind of visualize, oh, this is where my brother was, or this is where my uncle was. And so I think it helped the families to have a little more closure, right? That they could at least see the country. And I think what was also important for the families that I went with is they tell me it was so wonderful to see a thriving country, that there was a reason for our loved ones to die, because now, millions of Koreans are living in freedom and prosperity. So I know that it brought them a sense of pride that they hadn't really realized, seeing the country the way it is today. So I know this was a very important trip in so many ways for them. But yes, I absolutely understand just the frustration, the despair, and just helplessness the families feel, right? Helplessness, because they're in North Korea. We can't do anything about what North Korea is going to do. We don't know when they're going to return the next set of remains. They're so hostile to the rest of the world. But so I just wanted to honor all the families and just help people recognize the pain these families carry, and just really empathize with the families and what they live with every day. I wanted to talk a little bit about the most recent repatriation of Korean War missing, which took place in August 2018. President Trump met with Kim in Singapore, and after that, he was able to negotiate the return of American remains from the Korean War. So these are the missing, some of the missing. And in these 55 caskets, from what I understand from DPAA, about 200 or so heroes could be in these caskets. And to date, they have identified 47 of them. So this is really miraculous, because these families never thought their loved ones would be returned from North Korea, and here they are. And one of those families I have the honor of knowing is the family of Major Harvey Storms. He was a major leading his battalion out of Chosun Reservoir, fighting with the U.S. Army 7th Infantry. And he went missing during the battle. And here he is now, 70 years later, finally home. So I really hope that there will be more opportunities for American families to get closure like this. And I really pray and hope for more returns of American missing. There's still 5,300 missing in North Korea. What I want to talk about next is something really special you did, Robin. I'm gonna do this here real quick. I'm gonna go to you. In 2017, when you and I met, you told me about a wreath laying that you were going to do at the Korean War Veterans Memorial Foundation Memorial in Washington, D.C. And you had prepared a beautiful wreath, and you were collecting notes and things from families to put on this wreath to lay on at the memorial. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what that was like? And I know there's something you wrote for that wreath laying that you did in 2017 at the memorial.
Yeah, this would have been the second time first time was the Coalition of Family had a Korean War veteran who was attending the update lay wreath. And that was just so special. This time, in 2017, I got the idea that maybe what I could do was bring a wreath and allow the families to write a little note that we could stick in the wreath to their loved one. And then at the end of the update, we went to the memorial, the Korean War Memorial, said a prayer, and laid the wreath. And it's just like we wanted to do something, you know, to let them know that we love them and that they're important to us and they're not forgotten. That's the big thing. So I had written something basically for everyone. I'll go ahead and read that. This is a dedication to all U.S. servicemen who paid the ultimate price in the Korean War. We search for answers and mourn the moments that could have been. The absence of sweet exchange of words and thoughts, the sound of your voice, the smiles and laughter, the comfort of your presence, the sharing of life. You are remembered. Our enduring love for you remains forever in our hearts and souls. God bless.
Beautiful, beautiful. So you put that note along with all the other notes from the families at the memorial. Now, at the time you were there in 2017, we didn't have what we're going to have next year, which is the Wall of Remembrance. Right now, as you know, as everyone knows, the Korean War Veterans Memorial only has the statues of the soldiers trudging through the bushes there, and then there's a wall of faces etched on the side, but there's no names of the fallen heroes, including Robin's uncle. So I want to talk a little bit now about what is currently underway at the Korean War Veterans Memorial that will have so much meaning for you and all the families, all the Gold Star families of the Korean War, not just the missing, but also killed in action. So let me go ahead and share my screen again and show you what is underway. Okay. All right. So as you know, this is kind of the aerial view of the Korean War Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. And what I wanted to share with everyone who may not know is that you see that round circle, that is the pool of remembrance there. And then the statues are in that triangular area, statues of soldiers trudging through. And then the wall with all the faces etched is on the right. But in that circle, the pool of remembrance, now that pool of remembrance area will be encircled by walls, a wall of remembrance, which will list the names of over 36,000 American heroes who gave their lives in the Korean War. So it is currently underway, and it's projected to be finished by July 27th for dedication next year on July 27th. So this is kind of the rendering of what the wall will look like. It's circular and it goes all around this area, and it will have the names of all the Korean War fallen heroes, including Sergeant William Charles Bradley, Robin's uncle. So this is a closer view of what the names will look like. This is looking towards, I think, the Lincoln Memorial there. But so this will be a very significant event for all the Gold Star families. And so I wanted to make sure to share with everyone that next year, July 27th, 2022, the Wall of Remembrance honoring America's fallen heroes will be dedicated in honor of these heroes and all the Gold Star families like Robin's. So Robin, are you there?
Sure.
I'm gonna come back here now. All right, every time I do this, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to lose my. Okay, so here we are. So Robin, can you tell me a little bit more about what this wall means to you? And I know you had recently been quoted in an article, something so beautiful you said about what this wall means to you. Can you share that with us?
I'm not. I don't remember exactly what the quote was, but we don't have a place. My family doesn't have a place that we can go and visit my uncle where his physical remains are. And, we can't talk to him. We can't visit him. We can't pray over his grave. He's not here. And so this wall with his name etched, regardless if his remains come back or not, will be there forever. He will not be forgotten. And I look forward to that day where I can just trace his name. And I know it would make my mother so happy. And I am so grateful for this project, because so many of us may never ever have the opportunity to have the remains returned. And that's just a reality. And so I am just so happy that this project is coming around and will be ready and be able to see it. And I just can't imagine all of us being there together as family members, as Gold Star family members, and just that awesome energy that we'll be feeling.
Mm-hmm. It'll really be a sacred, I think, time for all the families to be there together, honoring each other's loved ones and their own, and to have that bond you have with each other, and understanding that you have with one another of that loss that you have carried. I think in the article that you were quoted, you said something like, just to be able to trace with your fingers, your uncle's name, will be the closest you'll feel to your uncle. That is such a poignant and very sad and powerful statement at the same time. And so I really appreciate your opening your heart and sharing some very painful things about what it's like to be a family member of someone who's still missing. And I hope that as Robin shared today's very personal and painful things, that people have an appreciation for the sacrifices made by these heroes and their families. The families also made lifelong sacrifices here, living without that person in their life. So you're absolutely right, Robin. I think what I hear from families is that you don't want your loved ones to be forgotten. And so this wall of remembrance is going to be the greatest gift to making sure they're not forgotten. And another way we can do that is to remember them, right? Like we did today. So I am so grateful to you, Robin, for remembering your uncle and making him known. And I'll never forget your uncle. I will carry his name in my heart. And so I cannot even describe to you, Robin, how grateful and humbled I am to know a family who gave up their loved one to save us. This is a very direct relationship I feel to you and all the families. Someone in your family died so we could live. And it is a staggering feeling to try to describe to someone. If you met someone whose family gave up somebody in their family for you to live, I think you would have a sense of what I feel. Just the utter humility, gratitude, and sorrow. And so I just want to express to all the families that we Koreans will forever be grateful, and we can never pay this debt. But I hope that this interview today and many others I will do with Gold Star families will help people appreciate the sacrifices made, and that we Koreans will never take that for granted. That is really my hope, that we never take this for granted, that we will always remember the sacrifice made by heroes like William Charles Bradley, who went to Korea 2 times, not only once, but 2 times. What a great hero to the Korean people he is. I really want to emphasize that This hero went to Korea 2 times at the most desperate times in the life of the Korean people. He was there. And so he will always be a great hero to me and the Korean people, Robin. I can't thank you enough for everything you have done in your life in honor of your uncle and in honor of all these other heroes by helping these other families. And I look forward to continuing my friendship with you and learning as much as I have, and continue to learn from you as you continue this quest. And I look forward to being with you in Washington, D.C. next year for the dedication. And
I look forward to that.
we will honor your uncle together.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And I just can't thank you enough for your compassion. I've never met anybody with such a loving compassion for people. And I just want you to know that you are very special.
Well, I really appreciate that, Robin, but I think it comes from God, that compassion. And maybe that is the best kind of compassion that comes from God's heart, because this journey I'm on was God's idea. It wasn't even my idea, so I can't really take credit. And it's God who puts this in my heart every day to show me what I need to do for Korean War veterans and Gold Star families. And so I know this is God's blessing I'm trying to give to the families. And so I'm so glad to hear that, because I know the families are absolutely deserving of all the love and honor we Koreans can give to you. So thank you, Robin, for spending this time with me today. And I look forward to talking to you soon. It is such an honor to know you, Robin. It's such, it's a truly an honor. I don't know how I get to know so many heroes in my life, including Gold Star families. You're all heroes to me, just like veterans are. So God bless you, Robin. Thank you so much.
So welcome.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.